A soldier spots a pistol lying on the ground. He reaches down to pick it up. That single motion just ended his life. In World War II, the most dangerous weapon on the battlefield was not always the one pointed at you. The enemy did not only want to kill you with weapons you could see, they wanted to kill you with the ones you trusted, touched, and never suspected. These are every weapon that made grown men freeze, hesitate, and never move again. First we have this, the SD-2 butterfly bomb, used by Germany. This small submunition was dropped in the thousands from aircraft and scattered across fields, roads, and villages. It had spinning wings that made it look like a toy or a piece of harmless debris. The moment a curious soldier or civilian picked it up, it detonated. It was one of the first weapons in history specifically designed to kill through curiosity. Next, this, the Italian thermos bomb, officially known as the Bomba OTO Model 35. It was engineered to look exactly like an abandoned metal thermos flask. Soldiers in the North African desert, desperate for water, would reach for it without hesitation. The anti-handling fuse inside detonated on movement, and it killed hundreds of Allied troops who never saw it coming. Let us continue with this, the German coal bomb, called the Kohlen bomb. It was a real explosive device disguised to look like an ordinary lump of coal. German saboteurs placed these inside coal supplies destined for Allied ships and locomotives. When the coal was shoveled into a furnace, the device exploded, destroying the engine or the boiler from the inside. Simple, invisible, devastatingly effective. Next we have this, the German canned goods bomb. Retreating German forces would leave behind tins of food that looked untouched and safe. Inside was a timed or pressure-triggered explosive charge. A hungry soldier reaching for what he thought was a meal was instead met with an explosion, powerful enough to take off his hand or kill everyone nearby. It turned the basic human need for food into a death sentence. And trust me, we are just getting started. The weapons coming up next are the ones that soldiers were officially ordered never to go near. Continuing with this, the Japanese ball bomb, the Type 98. It was a round, smooth grenade that looked like an oversized metal ball. Because of its shape, it could roll unpredictably after landing, and soldiers had no way of knowing if it had already armed itself. The fuse was inconsistent and sensitive, meaning it could go off at any moment after being disturbed. Next up is the German Model 24 stick grenade used as a booby trap. The Germans were masters at leaving these behind in retreating positions. They would place a stick grenade under a helmet, a weapon, or a dead body, with the pull cord attached to the object above. The moment a soldier lifted the item, the cord activated the 4-second fuse. The grenade was already in his hand before he understood what had happened. First we have this, the S-Mine 35, better known as the Bouncing Betty. This is one of the most feared anti-personnel mines in the history of warfare. When triggered by foot pressure or a tripwire, a propellant charge launched the mine up to about 1 meter in the air before the main charge detonated. It was specifically designed to explode at waist and groin height, maximizing casualties. Soldiers who heard the first pop after stepping on one had less than half a second to react. Next, this, the schu Mine 42. The Germans built this mine using a simple wooden box, completely removing any metal components. This made it entirely undetectable by the metal detectors that Allied combat engineers depended on. It contained a small explosive charge, powerful enough to blow off a foot or lower leg. Engineers had to probe the ground inch by inch with bayonets to find them, a process that was as slow as it was terrifying. We are not even halfway through this list yet. What comes next are mines and weapons, so well hidden that trained soldiers walked right over them without ever knowing. Let us continue with this. The Topf Mine. Germany built this one using a ceramic pot design, again with the sole purpose of defeating metal detectors. It was one of the most difficult mines to locate and disarm in the entire war. The pressure plate on top required very little weight to trigger, meaning even a crawling soldier could set it off. Next we have this, the Regal Mine 43. This was a large anti-tank mine, but what made it feared by soldiers was its built-in anti-handling mechanism. Engineers sent in to remove it would trigger a secondary fuse the moment they attempted to lift it. It was designed not just to stop tanks, but to kill the people trying to clear the road afterward. Continuing with this, the Glasmine 43. Germany produced this mine using almost entirely glass components. It contained no metal whatsoever, making every detection method available to Allied forces completely useless against it. It was small, low profile, and nearly invisible in soil. Combat engineers considered it one of the most dangerous objects they ever encountered. Next up is the Italian B-2 mine. This mine was notorious among Allied engineers in the Italian campaign. It was fitted with a highly sensitive anti-disturbance fuse that triggered if the mine was tilted, lifted, or interfered with in any way. Disarming it was considered so dangerous that engineers were often instructed to detonate it in place rather than attempt removal. Now we move into weapons that were just as dangerous to the soldiers carrying them as to the enemy they were aimed at. First we have this, the lunge mine, Japan's Type 3 anti-tank weapon. This device required a Japanese soldier to physically sprint toward a tank and thrust a pole-mounted explosive charge directly into the hull. The explosion radius was large enough that the soldier using it had almost no chance of survival. It was essentially an officially sanctioned suicide weapon, and Japanese soldiers were trained and ordered to use it. Next, this, the PIAT, or projector infantry anti-tank used by British and Commonwealth forces. To fire it, the soldier had to cock a massive internal spring that required enormous physical strength. The recoil on firing was brutal enough to fracture ribs if the weapon was not held correctly. It was also known for misfiring at critical moments, and soldiers dreaded having to recock it in the middle of a firefight. Let us continue with this. The panzerfaust. This single-shot anti-tank weapon was powerful and effective, but it came with a serious and often deadly flaw. The backblast it produced when fired was enormous, and in any enclosed space such as a building, a bunker, or an alley, it could kill or severely injure the operator. As the war neared its end and untrained soldiers were handed these weapons, friendly fire deaths from Panzerfaust backblasts became tragically common. Next we have this. The Type 89 grenade discharger, known among Allied soldiers as the knee mortar. When Allied soldiers captured this Japanese weapon, its curved base plate led many to believe it was designed to rest on the thigh and fire from there. It was not. It was designed to be braced on the ground. Soldiers who fired it off their knee experienced the full force of the recoil directly into the femur, resulting in catastrophic leg fractures. The next weapons on this list are the ones that turn the soldier carrying them into the primary target on the entire battlefield. Continuing with this, the M2 flamethrower, used by American forces. The operator carried 2 large tanks of pressurized flammable fuel strapped to their back, making them an immediate and obvious target for every enemy soldier in range. The tanks were vulnerable to enemy fire, and a punctured tank could ignite and engulf the operator in seconds. Flamethrower operators had the lowest life expectancy of any infantry role in World War II. Next up is the Ohka Cherry Blossom rocket bomb, used by Japan. This was a piloted, rocket-powered glide bomb designed for one mission only. The pilot was carried to the target area inside a larger aircraft, then released. Once released, there was no way back. The cockpit was sealed, the rocket ignited, and the pilot guided the weapon into an Allied warship at speeds exceeding 600 kilometers per hour. It was purpose-built for death. First we have this, the volkssturmgewehr. This crude semi-automatic rifle was mass-produced in the final desperate months of the war in Germany. It was built from stamped metal parts with minimal quality control and almost no standardized testing. Barrels split, actions jammed, receivers cracked on firing. The soldiers handed these weapons, many of them teenagers or elderly men, were given something that was almost as likely to injure them as the enemy. Next, this, the FG-42 paratrooper rifle. This was a genuinely advanced weapon for its time, capable of both semi and fully automatic fire. However, its recoil and muzzle climb during automatic fire were violent and difficult to manage, especially for soldiers who had not trained extensively with it. In the hands of an inexperienced operator, a full auto burst could easily go wide and upward, making it dangerous in close-quarters situations. We still have some of the most psychologically terrifying weapons on this list to get through. Do not go anywhere. Let us continue with this. The Boys anti-tank rifle, used by British and Commonwealth forces. When this rifle was introduced, it was capable of penetrating light armor, but by the time of World War II, most enemy vehicles had outgrown its effectiveness. What never changed was its recoil. which was described by soldiers as like being kicked by a horse. Shoulder fractures and collarbone injuries from improper use were common, and many soldiers simply refused to fire it more than once. Next we have this, the abandoned Luger P8 pistol. The Luger was the most recognized and most desired trophy weapon of the entire war. German forces knew this perfectly, and they exploited it. Retreating soldiers would leave Lugers on the ground with a thin wire running from the trigger guard to a concealed grenade or pressure mine underneath. The soldier who reached down and lifted that pistol triggered the device before he could even stand back up. Continuing with this, the abandoned German MP-40 submachine gun. Like the Luger, the MP-40 was a weapon Allied soldiers desperately wanted to take home. German engineers placed explosive charges beneath abandoned MP-40s in cleared positions in buildings. Some were wired to detonate when the weapon was picked up, others when the magazine was removed. Word traveled fast through Allied units after the first casualties, and soldiers were officially warned never to touch enemy weapons without an engineer present. Next up is the German Stahlhelm steel helmet. The iconic German helmet was another prime booby-trap target precisely because soldiers wanted it as a souvenir. German troops placed S-mines beneath helmets left lying in open positions. The weight of the helmet held the pressure plate down. The moment a soldier lifted it, the mine launched upward and detonated at waist height. It was a devastatingly simple trap that cost many lives. The weapons coming up now include things that entire naval crews refuse to go near. Keep watching. First we have this, the abandoned St. G44 assault rifle. The Sturmgewehr 44 was arguably the most advanced infantry rifle of World War II, and Allied soldiers knew it. German forces took full advantage of this by rigging abandoned examples with internal explosive charges. A soldier who picked one up and cycled the action, or worse, pulled the trigger, risked detonating the charge directly in his hands and face. Next, this, the abandoned German field telephone. Communication equipment left behind during German retreats was frequently wired to detonate. When a soldier picked up the receiver to listen for enemy communications or to test the line, the act of lifting the handset completed an electrical circuit connected to an explosive charge. These traps were particularly effective because soldiers were actively encouraged to exploit captured enemy communications equipment. Let us continue with this. The Flamethrowers 35 and 41, the German military flamethrower. Like the American M2, the German flamethrower operator was an instant priority target the moment he was spotted. The fuel canisters were under high pressure and vulnerable to small arms fire. A single, well-placed round into the tanks could cause a catastrophic rupture and fire that completely engulfed the operator. Soldiers dreaded carrying it and dreaded facing it in equal measure. Next, we have this, the German Nebelwerfer, nicknamed the Screaming Mimi by Allied troops. This multi-barreled rocket launcher produced a distinctive wailing, shrieking sound during its flight that was unlike anything else on the battlefield. The sound alone was enough to cause soldiers to freeze or break cover. The psychological damage of the Nebelwerfer was considered by many commanders to be just as significant as its physical destructive power. We are almost at the end of this list, but the final weapons are the ones that even trained specialists refuse to handle alone. Continuing with this, white phosphorus grenades. Used by multiple sides throughout World War II, white phosphorus ignites spontaneously on contact with oxygen and burns at approximately 800 degrees Celsius. Water does not extinguish it. It reignites the moment it is exposed to air again. Soldiers who came into contact with burning phosphorus fragments faced wounds that could not be treated in the field, and medics often had to submerge affected areas in water just to prevent the burning from continuing. Next up is the German limpet mine. This magnetically attached explosive was used by German combat divers to attach to the hulls of Allied ships. What made it feared even by the people placing it was the anti-handling device built into the design. Once armed, any attempt to remove or interfere with the mine would trigger immediate detonation. Allied naval engineers who discovered limpet mines on hulls faced an almost impossible task of removal. First we have this, the Japanese Long Lance Type 93 torpedo. This was technically the most powerful and fastest torpedo of World War II, with a range and speed that vastly exceeded anything the Allies possessed. However, it was powered by pure oxygen under extreme pressure, and the handling requirements during loading and arming were extraordinarily dangerous. Spontaneous detonations during handling killed Japanese naval crews on multiple occasions. Next, the German naval horn contact mine. These large spherical mines floated just below the surface of the water, anchored by a cable to the seabed. The protruding horns on the surface contain glass tubes filled with electrolyte. Any contact with a ship's hull crushed the horn, broke the tube, and completed the electrical circuit that triggered the detonation. Minesweeper crews who worked to clear these mines knew that a single mistake meant the end of their vessel and everyone aboard. And finally, the Kaiten Type 1 manned torpedo used by Japan. This was a full-size torpedo modified to carry a human pilot in a small sealed compartment. Once launched from a submarine, the pilot guided it directly toward an Allied vessel. The hatch was sealed from the outside after the pilot entered. There was no ejection mechanism, no escape route, and no return. The pilot was the guidance system, and the explosion was the only way the mission ended. It stands as one of the most extreme weapons ever deployed in the history of modern warfare.